welcome back to the weekly Monster Truck Podcast. Hi again, everyone. I'm Jackson, also known as Monster Jam Historian. You can follow my social media at Monster Jam Historian on Instagram and Monster Jam Historian on YouTube. Today, I am privileged to be joined by former Speed TV announcer Ken Stout. Ken, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. Speed TV announcer. I haven't heard Speed in a long time.
And I've wrote some questions for you here today about Monster Jam and even about some other things that the Monster Jam fans listening in at home might not know about. So it'll be a trip down memory lane. And I'm going to start off with my first question for you, which is, how did you get your start in the motorsport industry?
Yeah, it was kind of a twisted story, and fairly long. So we'll try to give you cliff notes on that. But I actually was my father was a go-kart racer when I was a little kid, so I was around motorsports really from the very beginning, and he had me in a go-kart probably when I was 8 years old or something like that. So I was around motorsports from an early age, and then always kept that passion. Of course, once you get it, it's hard to get rid of it. So got a little bit older and started drag racing. I was doing some motorcycle drag racing at the time. I was a much younger, thinner man at the time, and loved the sport, of course. And then eventually had a family, and most of that stopped for a few years. But we were living in New Jersey, and there was a drag strip that was very close to me, which is now closed up. But it was Old Bridge Township Raceway Park in Englishtown, New Jersey, which was a major racetrack on the NHRA tour. So it was just down the street. I was literally sitting in the backyard one day, having a beer and listening to Top Fuel cars go down the track. So I went hunting for the racetrack and ended up meeting the owners there. Asked them if they needed an announcer. I was doing some radio stuff at the time, so at a FM rocker, an FM rock station on the Jersey Shore. So they said sure. They were looking for somebody, so got in there and started announcing for the first time. Really, I was primarily hired to do the motorcycles at the time because that's what I knew, and they picked me up and hired me. And then TV crew came to that racetrack, so I was able to meet those guys and got really lucky. Right place at the right time, and they hired me to do some motorcycle drag racing as well. It was another niche that they needed for a show that they had on at the time called Inside Drag Racing, which was Ted Jones and Brett Kepner primarily. So they started using me on that, and somewhere along the way picked up the phone and talked to a guy named Bill Easterly from Monster Jam, who's still there today. He's one of the fat cats inside of the office, one of the higher ups. But he and I started a relationship, and he sent me out. I think the first show I did was at the Pontiac Silverdome, if I'm not mistaken. So, wow. Yeah, it was a bit of a run. It took a little bit to get there, but it was a lot of fun for sure.
And kind of going off of that, you're talking about you getting that experience at the motorcycle drag race and all that stuff. I read on the Lucas Oil Off-Road page that as a child, your goal was to become a professional racing driver, and while you did have some experience driving the pro light trucks, you seemed to gravitate more to the announcing side of things. What was the reasoning behind this?
It's that whole thing that they send me every month. They're called bills. So, yeah, I think we're all very well aware that if you want to be a racing driver, you better have a lot of money. And I don't mean a lot. I don't mean just a little bit of money. I mean like wicked amounts of money. So it's expensive to go racing, of course. So I just never had that option. Didn't really know the game good enough when I was young enough to make all the right moves. So I owned a trucking company for a long time. I didn't get started in this thing until really my mid to late 30s is when my broadcasting career, announcing career started. So I was just in the trenches digging with everybody else, and raising a family, had a couple of little kids, and trying to make ends meet. So it was tough, and certainly didn't have enough money to go racing. But the announcing opened up some doors and put me in the racing world. And then I was able to develop some relationships and Ron Stukenberg was the guy that was in charge of Nissan Motorsports North America at the time. And he was the one that opened up the door for me to get inside of the Pro Light truck that you mentioned. And it was absolutely a dream come true, no doubt about it. So it was a lot of fun. Ran about half the races, I think, that year. And then a few years later, I had another opportunity to drive a Pro Buggy, which is a four-cylinder buggy that ran in the same series and was able to compete for the entire season that time. So, yeah, and I've always been a mechanical type of guy. Even when I was doing Monster Jam, I think what I brought to the table, I was a color commentator primarily on Monster Jam with Scott Douglas. And the reason it worked, I always told them that they needed to have a driver in the seat at the time. But finding somebody that can do both, speak on TV properly, and know about the mechanical side, driving side, is a little harder than one might guess. But fortunately for them, I was always very mechanical. I loved the mechanical side of things and of the trucks. So those guys would help me out, walk me around, and I paid attention and learned a lot. So I brought a little something to the table mechanically, and consequently the driving along the way too also really helped me bring that perspective into the booth. So when I'm doing television for people, for the general fans that have never had the opportunity, hopefully I can give them a little better perspective of what the drivers are going through when they're out there doing what they do.
Absolutely. And kind of sticking on that question, regret is the wrong word, but kind of going off of that, are you disappointed at all that you moved from, like, in terms of your career goal, were you disappointed at all that you moved from the driving or being a professional racing driver aspect, moving towards the broadcasting, stuff that you do now? Were you disappointed at all?
It's just reality. Yeah, I mean, I'd still love to drive, this to this day. Not like the passion that I had, as a younger man, for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's disappointing to a degree where that's slipping away, and that opportunity is pretty much gone forever. I mean, you life out of that, whether you like it or not. And you really need to start as a young man these days. Whenever I was of age, people like Bobby Rahal, they didn't really get their career going to their late 20s, early 30s. So that opportunity was still there. But once you reach your mid 30s to late 30s, the window, for the most part, it's pretty much gone if you haven't already established yourself.
Yeah, it's a very
Unless you come in maybe
business.
Yeah, it's super competitive, and the talent is so deep. I mean, there's a million drivers that we'll never hear about that are loaded with talent. So again, it just requires a lot of money. I will say, the disappointment driving was not severe because I'm still making my living in this industry.
Yeah.
And then fortunately for me, my son is a very accomplished driver. So I've actually been able to live vicariously through him and his accomplishments, and I spot for him. And I'm as close to a driver as you can get without being a driver at an extremely high level, as I've spotted at the Indianapolis 500 for a number of years for some of those guys, including last year for Scott Dixon. So such an honor to spot for him at the Indianapolis 500 and nearly won it. He finished second. We were just a little bit short, but still an amazing honor to be part of that because you're all but in the race car with him.
Absolutely. And you actually talked about your son, which actually I was going to ask you about next. Your son, Robert, is, like you said, an accomplished racing driver who's competed in many different forms of racing and racing series, including the Grand Am Rolex, the Pirelli World Challenge, and the King of the Wing. Firstly, my dad is going to love this question because he is all over the sprint car stuff down here. But can you inform me and the viewers and listeners at home of your involvement in terms of your son's racing career?
Yeah, for sure. Heavily involved, especially in the beginning. The relationships I was able to create as a broadcaster opened up a lot of doors. Lucas Oil's been involved in supporting him since day one when he was 13 years old and still with him today, just re-upped our contract again for this season. So yeah, heavily involved as the business side is Ken Stout Racing, and we secured sponsorships all along the way. He was a factory Scion driver, when he won that Pirelli World Challenge Championship that you were talking about, the youngest driver in the history of the series, which I think at the time was 23 years old.
Wow.
And we won Scion, their first ever manufacturers championship. So it was a really big accomplishment. But all along the way, yeah, I mean, it's the business side of it has been me. He's been the driver's side. He's slowly stepping up and getting more involved in terms of the business. He has Stout Performance Driving. He's a professional driving instructor. So he has SPD that he's branding and developing and working along the way. It's been an amazing run. The sports car stuff, he's very, very talented at. Again, it's just finding the opportunity. And when you find the opportunity, you've got to find the money that you're going to need to go along with it. So we talked to all the right people. We're in all the right places. We just need to find that crack in the armor to get into a big ride, big car, and go get it done. The King of the Wing stuff, as you talked about, your father liking the sprint car stuff is amazing, man. As a father, I got to say there was plenty of times where I was pretty scared. Those things are rocket ships, man. His dynoed at 887 horsepower, so
Wow.
it was a monster for sure. Really, really fast stuff, and so much fun to watch those guys go do what they do. And I know there's a ton of open wheel fans down there in Australia. Fortunately, I've been able to host the Chili Bowl since 2008, which of course is the largest midget race on the planet that kicks off the racing season every year in January. And there's a ton of Australian, New Zealanders down there, big fan base, and some extremely talented racers as well that always compete in that.
Absolutely. And yeah, he's just, my dad is so into it, and he knows one of the drivers, Callum Walker. Shout out to you if you're listening to this. But yeah, it's good that your son is just, experimenting is the wrong word, but he's in all sorts of different types of classes and different types of motorsports that really kind of gives you what's the word, like a benefit in terms of progressing your racing career. Moving on to my next question, how did the opportunity come about to work with Speed TV and Monster Jam? I think you touched upon it just before, but if you're able to go more in depth for us.
Yeah. So my first opportunity, as I mentioned, I met the TV crew whenever I was at Englishtown, the drag strip there in New Jersey. And that really opened up the door to start doing some television there, kind of learning the craft a little bit. And fortunately, I was around some really talented guys that helped me learn properly with a good foundation. So I was able to take care of that, proper preparation to come into a television show and do what you're supposed to do. So I was picking away at it for a long time with this company called Masters Entertainment Group. Ted Jones, who's now a Hall of Famer, was the guy that owned the company, and he opened up the door for me to come in and do some work there. So, and in the TV world, just like anything else, man, you just keep scrapping, trying to do bigger and better things. And a lot of our shows were on ESPN2 at the time, and then Speed Channel, and then the off-road opportunity opened up. Marty Reed owned a series called Championship Off-Road Racing, which everybody called Core at the time. So he hired me to start doing short course off-road, and we moved from New Jersey to Indianapolis, which is where we're at now. So that really opened up the door, and television started doing a lot more television. And part of the reason he hired me was to do speed work on Speed Channel because he was an ESPN employee or talent, and he could not be on a competing network. So he hired me to do some stuff on Speed Channel, and that opened up the door and just developed great relationships with a number of people. Rick Miner being a primary there at the time, who turned out to be a wonderful friend, and also a guy from the Northeast. The people from the Northeast are a little more aggressive, so we kind of hit it off and had a great time. And eventually that moved into live television with a series called the ASA at the time, which is an oval track series. So it developed into some live television, and did some fun live stuff on Monster Jam as well. And Scott Douglas and I. So yeah, it just worked out. It was just a little piece at a time. Just kept scrapping.
And it's good that you bring up Scott Douglas, because my next question that I always ask the hosts that have whether current or before, like Matt Steele, or people now like Leslie Mears and stuff, I always ask these guests, what is it like working with Scott Douglas?
Scott's the man. He's the voice of Monster Jam. There's been some before him and a lot after him, but Scott has certainly stayed the course for so many years. The first guy that I worked with, and by the way, Leslie Mears is a really close friend. Her and I have worked together for many years in tractor pulling. So we're good buddies. She just lives a few hours south of me.
Oh
So
wow.
I'm glad to see she's doing so well. Matt Steele, worked with Matt Steele for a long time as well. Another good friend. But yeah, Scott Douglas is he just has a knack, man. Everybody knows him. Everybody loves him. He's a non-confrontational dude that just hangs around, gets the job done. Whatever it is they want him to do, he does it. Me, on the other hand, I've been a little more abrasive along the way, but Scott and I are good buddies, and I really respect him. He's very good at what he does.
Absolutely. And I wanted to also bring up something that you mentioned a lot earlier. You were telling me before about how you wanted to bring that sort of technical and driver aspect to the commentary with Scott's infinite knowledge of just Monster Jam, obviously being around the industry for so long. Do you think then that created like a perfect broadcast team, considering that, he had the history, he could pluck out who won at a race, like say you're in West Lebanon, he could pick out who won the racing competition like 10 years ago, and then obviously you bringing in that technical aspect. Do you think that kind of created a good, dare I say, broadcast bond, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we both had our strengths, right? And that's what you want in a broadcast. You want one guy to be really good at one thing and the other guy to be really good at something else, and bring all that to the fans watching at home. And sometimes, I do watch some of the broadcasts from time to time, and I do think it's missing some of that from time to time. But it's varied so much now. It's hard to even to wrap my head around all the different things, all the different directions it seems like they're trying to go, rather than having one set path. But for Scott and I mean, we were a great mix. You have to have some timing. Your chemistry has to be good. Knowledge needs to be good. Scott had great knowledge. I was always prepared. I was always working hard. And the one thing I couldn't bring to the table that I wish I could was the actual driving experience. But I always made it a point to go talk to the drivers and get their perspective from what happened in any particular situation, so that I knew what they were doing. Because my eyes are really good for whatever reason. I really see what cars are doing, so I can tell when cars are acting right, when they're acting wrong. It's not always the driver. Maybe it's vision. Maybe something's broke. Maybe it's a setup. Whatever it may be. But I've always been able to really keenly pay attention to the vehicle and get a really good feel for how it works, and I kind of understand the dynamics of the vehicle as well. So it helped out for sure. And I thought Scott and I were a great team. We had Mark Schroeder in there as well, and as a pit reporter driver, and he was just phenomenal. So when we had the three of us in there, man, we had a great team. We had a great time.
Absolutely. And you were talking about the chemistry too. And obviously, when you do anything really, in terms of broadcasting, in terms of anything, you've got to establish that chemistry. And to further back up what you were talking about just before, absolutely, I 100% think that you and Scott, and even the times we had Mark Schrader, you were able to just build that chemistry, because obviously, like I said, you were going off of your mechanical history and your keen eye, as you put it, and Scott's his knowledge. And then obviously you had Mark, who was also driving the Devastator truck. So then I guess at the times we had the three of you, you really had all of the aspects of it. And I definitely think that's what makes going back and watching the episodes, like going back on the I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Ken, but Monster Jam on their YouTube channel has a channel membership where you're actually able to pay monthly for a subscription. You get to watch all the old episodes from like 2004 and stuff when you were doing it. And you're able to, I love watching those episodes, not just because of the action, but because the chemistry is just there. It's not, I don't like saying that things are forced, but it's not forced. I can tell it's not. It's truly there. Like, you can just feel, I guess you can, as silly as it sounds, you can kind of feel the energy from that, you three or you two are protruding off each other during those broadcasts. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, what you're saying about feeling it, I mean, you can't fake it, right? I mean, you've got to, you've got to bring it to the people, and it does need to flow. You can tell when somebody is trying to fake it, or I don't even want to say fake it, but trying to fill in and do as good as they can about something they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
So there's a huge difference if somebody is on site and is able to ask the right questions, build that relationship and that rapport with the drivers, and then carry that to the booth and deliver that to the fans and try to get them as close to that driving experience or as close to being in the grandstands, with you during that show. So, and I have to go back too. I said Mark Schroeder, and he spells his last name with an O, and I don't know why I always get it wrong. But yeah, Mark Schroeder. So thanks for the correction on that. He'll next time he sees me, he'll light me up on that deal. But that's all good. I'll pull the plug on his boat and watch it sink. So yeah, he's a good cat, man. He's a super good cat, and another really really good friend, and not much that guy can't do. So as you talk about driving the Devastator, really talented behind the wheel, very, very good mechanically. And he had exactly what I was saying. He had that great rapport with the drivers. So he knew exactly what to ask those guys. He knew exactly what they had just gone through. And those guys would give him the information. And then, of course, we carried it on up inside of the booth. So it was a lot of fun. Those years were really good. And I thought we did a really good job for Monster Jam. And I mean, feel free to pass this on to Fox, by the way. I'm available if they want to bring all of that back. But we had some great chemistry, and once in a while on Facebook, I'll see where people bring up, who was your favorite Monster Jam announcer, and of course Scott Douglas is always heavy in the response and the comments, but they do throw us out there, on a strong level. So I'm really glad, honestly, to know that we please so many people, because, when you're in the middle of it, you're just digging, man. You're doing the best you can do and hoping everybody's liking it. So to be, 10, 15 years down the road and hear people still like to watch them and still enjoy the broadcast and like what we were doing, man, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's just, we grew up, with me, I've been watching this since, I don't know, yonks, I got the World Finals DVD box set when I was, I don't know, yay high, and when I was a youngin', I was like only 3 years old, and I've just been addicted to it since then, and I've just grown up just watching this, and there are so many people that are out there like me that grew up with the old Monster Jam, and we still can't get enough of it, just because, not just because of the action, but just because of the commentary itself. You don't necessarily process it as you're watching it, but really when you think back, there's so many aspects to, I guess, the sport and the broadcasts that add so much nostalgia and what's the word I'm looking for? Excitement, reliving, these moments and listening to, watching and listening to the broadcast itself. And moving on to my final question for you, is there a favorite moment from your time with Monster Jam, either being at an event or during commentary?
Yeah, the one that jumps out, of course, there was a bunch of them. I'm sure if we sat around and started talking about it, they would keep flowing back, and especially in the right group of people, where they spark some memories. But I believe it was the World Finals in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, where Dennis Anderson won the racing portion. He had never won the racing portion of the World Finals. Of course, a freestyle master and nothing he didn't accomplish there, but he wanted that so badly. Ments had beat him up and on both levels, and he wanted that thing so bad. So he finally got it, and he came up. When we did that in Vegas, we're outside of Vegas there, and we sat on top of the roof. Our broadcast booth was on top of the roof looking out at the stadium. So the trucks actually came in from behind us and around either side. And you would look out and just see a packed house, of all the fans. And then after that was over, Dennis Anderson came up onto the roof with us. And for whatever reason, I don't know if it was sitting there as part of a giveaway or whatever it was, but I happened to have one of those Gravedigger puffies, like the little pillows, but one of the. Yeah. Well, that's it. That's actually it. So that's the one. That's the, if you can see the try to get out of the way, the mirror, the camera mirroring, but that one's signed by Dennis, and it was just, I don't know, it was just a super cool moment, and it's stuck with me ever since. Just the whole atmosphere of being at the World Finals, being on the roof in the stadium, having Dennis come up and be so excited of something that he didn't accomplish ever before, because there was nothing that guy had done in a monster truck. It was just super cool, to be in the moment. So yeah, that one still sits inside of the case over there. It's pretty special.
And I was hoping you'd mention something about the World Finals, because I can think of all the amount of times at the World Finals that, especially that you've been at, that you have commentated over, and your reactions are so I mean, literally, that's how everyone would react. When Jimmy Cretin gets during the freestyle portion, he gets the truck stuck in the container, and then Lupe narrowly by like this much misses the truck, and Medusa actually knocking the truck over, and Tom Mentz like completely, like the stadium after his run, it was just filled with smoke and all that stuff. I mean, truly, I really wish that I would have been able to have gone and seen a World Finals, just in general, but especially one at Vegas. I've talked about this with many guests, but World Finals is obviously a huge deal, and wherever it is, but there will truly be no stadium in my eyes, or venue, or just place, will ever beat Sam Boyd Stadium at Las Vegas. That's just how I feel about it. Personally. Before I close off, is there anything you want to add about what I've just said?
Man, I mean, it's like I said, I guess in closing, the biggest thing is to know that, Scott Douglas, myself, and Mark, and all the guys along the way, have touched so many people. This sport has touched so many people. Everybody thought it was a fad. I can't tell you how long. I mean, for 20 years, they keep saying, oh, it's a fad, it's a fad. And I kept telling them, this thing's never going away, man, because there's new kids born every day. And those kids, by the time they're 5, 6, 7, they're absolutely in love with it. The passion is high, and the parents are looking for a way to get out of the house. So they come out, and, the moms and dads. And once you get there, I mean, it's an incredibly exciting show. They do a wonderful job at producing it, promoting it. I've always said it's the best kept secret in motorsports. I mean, back when I was doing it, they sold more tickets in the first quarter of the year than NASCAR sold all year long.
Wow.
And that was a while ago, and they've far surpassed that. I don't know if there's even a season or off season anymore. I know they go worldwide with it. So it's super cool to know that all of these drivers and part of the broadcast team have brought so much pleasure to so many people. That's a wonderful thing, man, for sure. So I'm glad to be a small piece of it.
And what a perfect note to end on. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Remember, if you want to follow my social media, it's at Monster Jam Historian on Instagram and Monster Jam Historian on YouTube. You can also follow the official Weekly Monster Truck podcast page at the Weekly MT Podcast on Instagram. You can also check out the Facebook page, the same name, Weekly Monster Truck Podcast. And for more places to listen on, you can, if you're watching us on YouTube, hello there, or you can listen to the strictly audio version on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Radio Public, all those great places. And in true Weekly Monster Truck Podcast tradition, Ken, is there anyone or anything you would like to shout out before we close off today's episode?
No, man, all good here. Congratulations, you're doing a great job. Nice to see people pushing this thing on. I'm going to join you. We've got a podcast as well called The Skinny. Just got it released on iHeartRadio, in fact, on April 1st. So we're super proud of that. And we've already had some big guests on there, but the official drop on iHeartRadio included Forrest and Morgan Lucas of Lucas Oil Products. So we're going to jump in this podcast game with you and see if we can't ruffle a few feathers.
I'll make sure to leave a link to Ken's podcast down below in the description. I want to thank each and every one of you once again for supporting me and allowing me to interview great people like Ken and all the other people I've had on the podcast. And stay tuned. We're going to be doing more podcast episodes very soon, and hopefully I'll have more great guests. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye, guys.